The war in Ukraine has amplified the global conversation about energy security. It has also highlighted the role that liquid natural gas plays, not only as part of that stability, but as a transition fuel as well. Norway-based Höegh LNG is a leading worldwide provider of floating LNG terminals, so it's very well placed to provide insight on this issue. I'm Rosanna Lockwood and I'm in Davos, where I sat down with some of the management team. It's time to talk LNG with Höegh LNG. President CEO Erik Nyheim, wonderful to have you here. Chairman Morten Höegh, thank you both so much for joining us here in beautiful Davos, Switzerland.
Great to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about Höegh LNG then, a major sort of institutional Norwegian company. But for those that may not be so familiar with it, Morten, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what it is the company
Sure.
does.
So the Höegh family are pioneers. My grandfather Leif started the shipping company in 1927 to operate one of Norway's first oil tankers. In 1973 we took delivery of our first LNG carrier, and in 2006 we entered the floating LNG regas business. At the time, LNG production and volumes were growing rapidly, but a number of customers didn't have the infrastructure to land and regasify the commodity. And we spotted an opportunity and a niche to do that on board vessels rather than in land-based terminals. So in 2009 we took delivery of the first two floating regas and storage units for the French company GDF Suez, which is now part of Total Energies. And since then we have become the global leading owner and operator of FSRUs today with a fleet of 10 vessels on the water.
Very interesting, Morten, to hear about Höegh LNG and the history of the company. Let's talk about the world in which it now operates, which is very high pressured from an energy perspective currently at the moment on a macro scale. Of course, the Ukraine war, already mentioned, has put LNG, liquid natural gas, for the first time at the forefront of the minds of members of the public as well. But let's talk about that global narrative about energy security. Erik, how has it shifted in the last year?
The war in Ukraine is the tragic, heartbreaking backdrop to this situation, which is really impacting whole Europe in terms of causing an energy crisis. And because of the sanctions that have been put on Russia, the repercussions and the blowing up of the pipelines, etc., the energy crisis is very much about natural gas. And the only way to replace the large volumes of Russian gas that have been imported into Europe is really to start importing liquefied natural gas, LNG. Fortunately, some European countries have had LNG infrastructure in place, typically large LNG terminals, but very few floating terminals. You know, what several countries are seeing as the solution, including Germany, which is the most exposed because they've been relying on pipeline gas from Norway and Russia, is really using floating terminals, and they're fantastic assets for several reasons. First of all, they're very quick to be deployed. In the case of Germany, within months. They're extremely flexible. They can be relocated to different places. They can be stopped when there's no longer use for them, and they can even be traded as LNG carriers in seasonality. And in addition to that, we think they're low cost as well. We estimate 40–50% lower cost than land-based terminals. And moreover, they don't require much land footprint, so they're also more environmentally friendly in that regard.
So we've talked in some detail now about the energy crisis, the role that LNG is playing in providing Europe, especially but everywhere in the world, with a more secure supply of energy. But of course, before February 2022 and the invasion of Ukraine, the war, most energy companies were tackling with the issue of a transition to a clean supply of energy. Talk to me about Höegh LNG and what you have been doing in that sense.
Yeah, so we are thinking a lot about it, and we are sort of active on two arenas. First of all, natural gas and LNG is the most efficient and cleanest form of hydrocarbons. And while the world is transitioning and scaling up renewable capacity, you need an alternative, you need a backup, and natural gas is there as the transition fuel. So we are very constructive on the prospects for LNG, both in terms of how volumes will develop, but also the importance of LNG as that transition fuel. Secondly, clean energy solutions and sort of new zero carbon energy carriers will also require significant infrastructure for storage, for transportation, for imports. And marine infrastructure will be required, and we believe that with our experience and competence, basically our people, we have a role to play to develop those new infrastructure solutions. And we are now actively in dialogues both with existing customers and new potential partners to develop and eventually deploy clean energy infrastructure solutions.
So it's interesting to hear it from the Höegh LNG side and what the company is doing. Let's talk about it from, if we can call it the client side, but the government side. Eric, the stakeholders in this, they're battling with a lot at the moment, securing a stable energy supply, ensuring that it's clean to meet UN sustainability goals on a governmental level as well, but also keeping it at affordable prices as well. They're thinking about members of the public and energy prices. Tell me a little bit about what you've witnessed there.
This is part of the energy trilemma that governance needs to balance, getting access to energy, which we discussed, energy security, making sure the energy transition happens, and at the same time making energy affordable. And over the last months, we've seen gas prices and electricity prices soaring. So this is definitely a short-term focus that also needs to be addressed. And we think floating terminals is part of that solution as well. The best thing you can do is make sure that there is capacity to import sufficient volumes so that you can also get the prices down on the commodities. And if you look at the cost of the infrastructure, we assess that our floating terminals is only about 2% of the total cost of landing LNG. Most of the cost is related to molecules. So we think it makes good sense to invest in good capacity to also then make sure enough volumes are imported.
Let's understand a little bit about how Höegh LNG has been sort of playing a role in this. You've given me examples about how floating terminals are key to providing energy security and stability. Give us some concrete examples. Where are your floating terminals at the moment? What are they doing?
Höegh LNG has been providing floating terminals and energy security for a number of years. And a great example and phenomenal success story is Lithuania. So back in 2012, the then president and government had the foresight to see that they could no longer rely on Russian gas. So they decided to launch a tender. And since 2014, our vessel, which was named Independence, was operational. And for those that were present the day it was arriving in Lithuania, people were cheering, waving flags, and really celebrating as an Independence Day. And today, Lithuania is fully energy independent, and they're also providing gas to neighboring countries such as Poland and Latvia. And today, Germany is a bit in the same situation. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, in his New Year's speech, said that floating terminals and LNG terminals is really what will make Germany permanently energy independent. Together with our partners, Total, RWE, Uniper, Deutsche Regas, we are delivering the 3 first LNG terminals into Germany. The first one was opened just before Christmas by Olaf Scholz and is now operational, so it's providing gas, feeding gas into the German gas grid line. The other 2 terminals will open within a matter of weeks. Höegh Gannet is the vessel which will be based in Brunsbüttel, and Neptune in Lubmin. So combined, these will have a capacity of about 20 billion cubic meters, or about a third of what Germany imported from Russia in 2021. And moreover, we think there's need for more assets. So we're working together with partners to provide that. The floating terminal fleet globally is really fully engaged. So what we're looking into now is do conversions to provide more capacity into the market.
Wonderful. It's been great learning about Höegh LNG, the trilemma that you guys are operating in, of course, as well, and plenty of challenges ahead, but it sounds like you're well placed to deliver. So we'll be tracking your movements as a company very closely. Morten Höegh, Erik Nyheim, thank you very much for joining us here in Davos, Switzerland. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
CMA CGM, a world leader in maritime transport and logistics, called upon the GTT Group as it prepared to tackle an unprecedented challenge, building the 23,000 TEU LNG-fueled container ship. A journey that began in 2011.
Bien avant tous ses concurrents, CMA CGM est venu nous voir pour commencer à réfléchir à des porte-conteneurs propulsés au GNL. On a travaillé ensuite pendant des années avec CMA CGM, avec les équipes techniques de CMA CGM sur cette application. On a creusé le sujet, on a associé de différents partenaires et puis finalement un jour, en 2017, CMA CGM a décidé d'y aller et a commandé 9 très grands navires, 23 000 boîtes propulsées au gaz naturel liquéfié.
What a sizable challenge it has been. 400 meters long, 61 meters wide, 78 meters high. Each vessel with a dead weight of 70,000 tons when empty. These ships can transport 215,000 tons of goods in a single trip. With such massive dimensions, powering ships in a cleaner way is a true challenge.
Quand CMA CGM commence à regarder le gaz naturel liquéfié comme un carburant pour le futur, il y a cette intuition que la pression environnementale va aller croissante au fil des années et que le gaz naturel liquéfié est une solution, le carburant de l'avenir. Et ça, c'est visionnaire. Aucun des concurrents de CMA CGM n'a fait ça à l'époque.
Environmentally, LNG is extremely advantageous, and CMA CGM could clearly see that.
Le gaz naturel liquéfié permet de réduire de 20% les émissions de CO2, de 85% les émissions d'oxyde d'azote, de 99% des oxydes de soufre et les particules.
So that CMA CGM's mega container ships could be able to go halfway around the world without needing to refuel, GTT took 9 years to develop a tank design that could store such a significant quantity of LNG on board. To reach its liquid state, the gas must be cooled to an extremely low temperature, minus 163 degrees below Celsius. After this cooling process, the gas in a liquid state occupies 600 times less volume than in its gaseous state. It must be stored in a tank that keeps it insulated throughout the entire journey. A tank that can withstand any voyage conditions.
Il faut voir que ces très grands bateaux, ils se tordent sur la mer, sur les vagues. Et toutes ces torsions, elles se répercutent sur la cuve. Et la cuve, c'est un objet très particulier. Vous mettez ce liquide extrêmement froid, elle se contracte sous le froid. Et puis, quand la cuve est à moitié remplie, vous allez avoir le liquide qui va aller d'un côté à l'autre de la cuve, au gré du roulis du navire. Et il faut que la cuve reste absolument intègre, qu'il n'y ait pas la moindre fuite, non seulement pendant le voyage, mais aussi pendant toute la vie du navire, pendant des dizaines d'années.
On board a container ship, the tank must not only maintain tightness, but also maintain the LNG's temperature. For this purpose, the tank walls are insulated by 27-centimeter thick polyurethane panels. The panels are fixed all around the tank up to its top. This technology, developed by GTT, gives the tanks an almost entirely perfect seal.
Il faut bien inspecter toutes les zones.
Sur Sur une cuve de cette dimension-là, il y a des dizaines de kilomètres de collage et il faut que tous ces collages soient parfaits. Et donc là, il est en train de vérifier si un collage a été bien effectué.
When there's any doubt, the engineers have a surprisingly simple way to check it. They cover the walls with soapy water and then place a plexiglass cube on it. With a pump, they create a vacuum. If any air bubbles escape, this proves that the seal is not complete. If this happens, you have to start all over again. The dimensions of the tank designed by GTT are gigantic. It's the biggest ever built for a container ship. It was designed to hold up to 18,000 cubic meters of LNG, which is the quantity needed to fuel the ship over a round-trip Asia-Europe voyage. To route the liquefied gas to the engine located at the other end of the ship, a large and powerful extractor is needed. This is called the gas mast.
Le mât gaz va supporter un élément fondamental du fonctionnement du navire, c'est-à-dire les pompes qui vont alimenter la chaîne gaz, lequel gaz va alimenter le moteur.
GTT's engineers needed to design a mast that was virtually indestructible because inside the tank, waves of minus 163 degrees below Celsius liquefied gas will collide with the centrally placed mast.
Et il va falloir que ça tienne pendant extrêmement longtemps. Donc c'est du très solide. C'est quelque chose de très impressionnant à voir.
The mast is installed through the top of the tank. It weighs 25 tons, is 6 meters wide, and must be inserted into an opening barely larger than that. It will be lowered to just a few centimeters above the bottom of the tank, where its 4 pumps will extract the LNG.
Quand on voit ça, on se demande mais comment c'est possible? Comment ça va tenir? C'est suspendu au toit de la cuve et ça descend jusqu'en bas avec la pompe qui va pomper le liquide au plus près du plancher de la cuve.
Once the mast is installed, the last layer of insulation is applied, the primary membrane, a 1.2 millimeter thick plate. This last layer, with its corrugated appearance, is what will make the structure flexible.
Son génie, c'est la souplesse qu'elle a. Et cette souplesse, elle est produite par ces ondes. Ces ondes sur ces plaques d'acier inoxydable qui vont se contracter sans exercer d'effort sur les kilomètres de soudure qu'il y a dans la cuve.
It took 8 months of work to achieve the tank's final look. The engineers are inspecting it one last time. No debris or dust can stay inside it because from the time of delivery until the next time they can access it, at least 5 years will go by. But before setting out to sea with its first cargoes, the container ship will undergo one last series of tests at sea.
On va faire des essais que le bateau ne verra plus jamais. Il va voir ça une fois dans sa vie.
3, 2, 1, start!
All of its equipment is tested under real-life conditions. The radars and electronic boards, plus the mechanical parts, such as the reactions of the engines and its LNG consumption.
Le moteur principal est réglé à 90% de puissance. Et donc on mesure tous les éléments extérieurs qui peuvent influencer sur la vitesse, comme la direction et force des vagues, de la houle, du vent. Nous, ce qu'on veut, c'est avoir la plus faible consommation possible, et donc la plus faible empreinte environnementale.
Today, 90% of the world's goods are transported by sea. Some 100,000 merchant ships are already out in the water. Managing their carbon footprint more effectively is therefore essential for the planet. Alongside its partners, the GTT Group helps meet this environmental challenge.
On fait ça depuis très très longtemps. On a accumulé un savoir-faire, un retour d'expérience sur ces navires en opération. On a accumulé des expertises complètement uniques. On a recours à des générations et des générations d'ingénieurs qui se sont succédés chez nous, qui ont poussé cette technologie à ces niveaux-là. Et aujourd'hui, non seulement on apporte une contribution au verdissement du transport maritime, mais aussi on se permet de rêver encore à de nouvelles étapes au-delà de celle-ci.
Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, lieber Klaus, my dearest Olena, for almost 1 year now, Ukraine has stunned the world. On that fateful February morning, many predicted that Kyiv would fall in a matter of days. But this did not account for the morale and the physical courage of Ukrainian people. Dearest Olena, you and your people, you have resisted the Russian invasion and pushed back against the aggressor, against all odds. Not even Russia's relentless attacks on civilians, and you have described them, or the specter of a brutal winter have shaken your resolve. In this last year, your country has moved the world and has inspired Europe. And I can assure you that Europe will always stand with you. Many doubted whether that European support would be so unwavering. But today, Ukraine is a candidate country to access the European Union. European countries are providing more and more critical weapons to Ukraine. We're hosting around 4 million Ukrainians in our cities, our homes, and our schools. And we have put in place the strongest sanctions ever, which leave the Russian economy facing a decade of regression and its industry starved of any modern and critical technologies. There will be no impunity for these Russian crimes. And, my friends, there will be no let-up in our steadfast support to Ukraine, from helping to restore power, heating and water, to preparing for the long-term effort of reconstruction. And to reaffirm that support, we announced yesterday that the Commission is delivering 3 billion euros of financial support. This is the first tranche of our 18 billion support package for 2023, the largest ever macrofinancial assistance to a third country. This is a strong message, and this will bolster Ukraine's financial stability, help to pay wages, ensure the running of hospitals and housing services and schools. I just want to say, my dearest Olena, and I think I can speak on behalf of this hall and this audience here, we are in it for as long as it takes and stand by our Ukrainian friends. And Europe's reaction to the war is the latest example in how our union has pulled together when it matters the most. Take energy. A year ago, Europe had a massive dependency on Russian fossil fuels built over decades. This made us vulnerable to supply squeezes, price hikes, and of course vulnerable to Putin's market manipulation. In less than a year, Europe has overcome this dangerous dependency. We have replaced 80% of Russian pipeline gas. In parallel, we have filled our storages. Of course, we have reduced our demand by more than 20% in the period from August to November. And through collective effort, we brought down gas prices quicker than anyone expected. From its peak in August, this was 350 euros per megawatt hour. It is now European natural gas prices dropped by 80% by this month. That is below the levels of before the Ukraine war. Europe has once again shown the power of its collective will. Nevertheless, we should be under no illusion how difficult these periods, first of pandemic and then followed by a war, are for our families and for our businesses. And we will have to show the same resolve as we face up to a collision of crises. Dear Klaus, as your global risk report sets it out, we see rising inflation, making the cost of living and the cost of doing business more expensive. We see energy being used as a weapon. We see threats of trade wars and the return of confrontational geopolitics. In addition, climate change already comes with a huge cost. And we have no time to lose in the transition to a clean economy. And that's what I want to speak about. The net zero transformation is already causing huge industrial, economic, and geopolitical shifts, by far the quickest and the most pronounced in our lifetime. It is changing the nature of work. It is reshaping the nature of our industry. But we are on the brink of something far greater. Just think, in less than 3 decades, we want to reach net zero. In less than 3 decades, we have to reach net zero. But the road to net zero means developing and using a whole range of new clean technologies across our economy, in transport, in buildings, in manufacturing, in energy. The next decades will see the greatest industrial transformation of our times, maybe of any times. And those who develop and manufacture the technology that will be the foundation of tomorrow's economy will have the greatest competitive edge. So the scale of the opportunity is clear for all to see. The International Energy Agency estimates that the market for mass-manufactured clean energy tech will be worth around $650 billion a year by 2030, more than triple today's levels. To get ahead of the competition, we need to keep investing in strengthening our industrial base and making Europe more investment and innovation friendly. And that is what investors are looking closely at in the different markets for clean tech. Here in Europe, we moved first with the European Green Deal to set the path to climate neutrality by 2050. We have cast our net zero target into law to provide the predictability and the transparency business needs. We followed up with our investment firepower of Next Generation EU, that is our 800 billion investment plan, the Just Transition Fund and other instruments across the economy. This is unprecedented investment in clean technology across all sectors of the green transition. Clean tech is now the fastest growing investment sector in Europe, doubling its value between 2020 and 2021 alone. And the good news for the planet is that other major economies are also now stepping up. Japan's green transformation plan aims to help raise up to 20 trillion yen, around 140 billion euros, through green transition bonds. India has put forward a production-linked incentive scheme to enhance their competitiveness in sectors like solar photovoltaics and batteries. The United Kingdom, Canada, and many others have also put forward their investment plans in clean tech. And of course, we have seen the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, the $369 billion clean tech investment plan. That means that together, the European and the United States alone are putting forward almost €1 trillion to accelerate the clean energy economy. This has the potential to massively boost the path to climate neutrality. But it is no secret that certain elements of the design of the Inflation Reduction Act raised a number of concerns in terms of some of the targeted incentives for companies. So this is why we have been working with our United States friends to find solutions, for example, so that EU companies and EU-made electric cars can also benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act. Our aim should be to avoid disruptions in transatlantic trade and investment. We should ensure that our respective incentive programs are fair and mutually reinforcing. And we should also set out how we can jointly benefit from this massive investment, for example, by creating economies of scale across the Atlantic or setting common standards. At the heart of the joint vision is our conviction that competition and trade are the key to speeding up clean tech and climate neutrality. And that means that we, Europeans, also need to get better at nurturing our own clean tech industry. We know that we have a small window to invest in clean energy and innovation and clean tech before the fossil fuel economy becomes obsolete. So we have an industry at the moment being challenged by the pandemic, supply chain issues and price shocks. We see aggressive attempts to attract our industrial capacities away to China and elsewhere. We have a compelling need to make this net zero transition without creating new dependency. We've learned our lessons from the fossil fuels. And we know that future investment decisions will be taken now, depending on what we do today. We Europeans have a plan, a Green Deal industrial plan. Our plan to make Europe the home of clean tech and industrial innovation on the road to net zero. Our Green Deal industrial plan will be covering 4 different pillars: the regulatory environment, financing, skills, and trade. The first pillar is about speed and access. We need to create a environment that allows us to scale up fast and to create conducive conditions for sectors crucial to reach the net zero goal that we've set ourselves. This includes, for example, wind, heat pumps, solar, clean hydrogen, storage, and other topics, for which demand is boosted by our next generation EU and Repower EU investments. To help make this happen, we will put forward a new Net Zero Industry Act. This will follow the same model as our CHIPS Act. The new Net Zero Industry Act will identify clear goals for European clean tech by 2030. The aim will be to focus investment on strategic projects along the entire supply chain. We will especially look at how to simplify and fast-track the permitting process for clean tech production sites. In parallel to this Net Zero Industry Act, we will reflect on how to make important projects of common European interest, the famous IPCEIs, faster to process, easier to fund, simpler to access for small and medium enterprises and for all our member states. The Net Zero Industry Act will go hand in hand with the critical Raw Materials Act. For rare earths, which are vital for manufacturing key technologies like wind power generation, hydrogen storage, you name it. Europe is today 98% dependent on one country, China. Or take lithium, with just 3 countries accounting for more than 90% of the lithium production, the entire supply chain has become incredibly tight. This has pushed up prices and is threatening our competitiveness, so we need to improve the refining, processing and recycling of raw materials here in Europe. And in parallel, we will work with our trade partners to cooperate on sourcing, production and processing to overcome the existing monopoly. To do this, we can build a critical raw materials club, working with like-minded partners from the United States to Ukraine to collectively strengthen supply chains and to diversify away from single monopoly. This is Pillar 1, speed and access through the Net Zero Industry Act. The second pillar of the Green Deal Industrial Plan will boost investment and financing of clean tech production. To keep European industry attractive, there is a need to be competitive with offers and incentives that are currently available outside the European Union. This is why we will propose to temporarily adapt our state aid rules to speed up and simplify them. Easier calculations, simpler procedures, accelerated approvals. For example, simple tax break models. And with targeted aid for production facilities and strategic clean tech value chains to counter relocation risks from foreign subsidies. But we also know that state aid will only be a limited solution which only a few member states can use. Now, to avoid fragmenting of the single market and to support the clean tech transition across the whole Union, we must also step up EU funding. For the medium term, we will prepare a European Sovereignty Fund as part of the midterm review of our budget this year. This will provide a structural solution to boost the resources available for upstream research, innovation and strategic industrial projects. But as this will take time, we will look at a bridging solution where it is most needed to provide fast and targeted support. And to support this, we are currently working hard on a needs assessment. So the second pillar is funding and state aid. The third pillar of the Green Deal Industrial Plan will be developing the needed skills to make this transition happen. The best technology is only as good as the skilled workers who can install and operate it. And with a huge growth in new technologies, we will need a huge growth in skills and skilled workers in this sector. This will cut across all we do, whether it is regulation or finance, and will be the priority of our European Year of Skills. The fourth pillar will be to facilitate open and fair trade to the benefit of all. For clean tech to deliver net zero globally, there will be a need for strong and resilient supply chains. Our economies will rely ever more on international trade as the transition speeds up to open more markets and to access the input needed for the industry. So we need an ambitious trade agenda, including by making the most, for example, out of the existing trade agreements, for example with Canada, or for example with the United Kingdom, with which we are trying hard to sort out our difficulties. We're working on concluding agreements with Mexico, Chile, New Zealand and Australia, and to make progress with India and Indonesia. And we need to restart a conversation regarding the Mercosur agreement, because international trade is key to helping our industry cut costs, create jobs, and develop new products. But by the same token, where trade is not fair, we must respond more robustly. China has made boosting clean tech innovation and manufacturing a key priority of its 5-year plan. That's good. It dominates global production in sectors like electric vehicles and solar panels, which are essential for the transition. But competition on net zero must be based on a level playing field. China has been openly encouraging energy-intensive companies in Europe and elsewhere to relocate all or part of their production. They do so with the promise of cheap energy, low labor costs, and a more lenient regulatory environment. At the same time, China heavily subsidizes its industry and restricts access to its market for European Union companies. We still need to work and trade with China, especially when it comes to this transition. So we need to refocus our approach on de-risking rather than decoupling. This means using all our tools to deal with unfair practices, including the new foreign subsidies regulation. And we will not hesitate to open investigations if we consider that our procurement or other markets are being distorted by such subsidies. We want to cooperate, we want to work together. Climate change needs a global approach, but it has to be a fair approach and a level playing field. Ladies and gentlemen, the story of the clean tech economy is still being written. And over the years I've been coming to Davos, I've heard many times that we are on the cusp of a period of creative destruction that the economist Joseph Schumpeter spoke of. His idea that innovation and new tech replaces the old, leaving the old industry and jobs behind. In many ways, this dynamic applies to the clean tech revolution of today and tomorrow. But I believe if Europe gets it right, the story of clean tech economy can be one of creative construction, with the right support and incentives for companies to innovate, with the right focus on skills and people, with the right environment to make the most out of our world-leading innovation capacity. Europe already has everything it takes: talent, researchers, industrial capacity, investment. And Europe has a plan for the future. And this is why I believe the story of the clean tech economy will be written in Europe. Thank you very much.